everyone, welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to my final video for New York Film Festival 60 coverage. It's a little bit sad that I was only able to see a small handful of movies this year at the festival, but I did get to see some films, including the one I'm about to talk about today, She Said, directed by Maria Schrader. For those who don't know Maria Schrader's name, she's not necessarily one of the biggest names making films today, but she made a really amazing miniseries called Unorthodox on Netflix a few years ago. I think it's one of the most stunning miniseries in the past few years. She's back in the director's chair for this film, She Said, which is a biographical drama, actually a very recent biopic about the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault allegations.
I was told that the wrongdoing in Hollywood is overwhelming.
The film centers around journalist Jodi Kantor, played by Zoe Kazan, and Megan Twohey, played by Carey Mulligan, as they attempt to get this story out through the New York Times. I mean, this takes place primarily in the headquarters of the New York Times, a building I pass every single day on the way to work. So it's kind of exciting to see New York just infused in this film. This is a very New York film. It's no surprise that this played at the New York Film Festival, but it really dives into the journalist angle and what journalists do and the depths they go to make sure that certain voices are heard, certain stories are told.
Hi, my name is Jodi Kantor. I'm an investigative reporter for the New York Times.
And I can definitely see a lot of parallels to this in a film, Spotlight, which actually won Best Picture in 2015. That film centered around molestation in the Catholic Church. This one focused on sexual assault misconduct in Hollywood, and I think because of that, there are a lot of parallels to be made. It's about the journalists trying to make the voices of their victims heard, and through that we get some really, really heartbreaking scenes hearing from these victims and all the misconduct they've experienced. But you also see a real hustle as a journalist and the urgency to try to get these stories told, and kind of the depths you go to both personally in your own life and just in your workplace to get these stories told, and the obstacles you face as journalists, especially as a women journalist in this sense, because this is all about women empowerment, trying to show that they as journalists are able to, stand out in their field as well. Yes, this is more centered around journalists and the actual news story of trying to get it published and get the actual evidence and get the actual quotes from the people that had experienced all the misconduct. But She Said never loses sight of its victims, which I think is the most important element in telling a story like this. You don't want to make it about the journalists the whole way through, because at the end of the day, the victims' voices are the most important ones being told, especially in this story, especially in a story so current, so new. I mean, this case, the actual misconduct allegations have been happening for years and years and years, but this story didn't break till after Trump's election. We actually see in every scene, there's always a TV in the background playing the news of the day, and it was honestly quite harrowing to see. I actually think that was a very effective storytelling device, because it not only gave us a sense of where we were in the timeline of everything happening, but it also reminded us of the darkness lurking over us and the real setback that the election of 2016 brought, not just on journalists in general, but on society and just our everyday life and the kind of conversations we were having, the way our lives were changed from that. It was definitely harrowing to see. As I said, though, we get some real powerful moments from the victims, and I think the highlights of this film were the victims retelling their stories. It was obviously very hard to stomach, hard to watch. It made my blood boil, and I think that's a power that this film has, is just making you so angry.
We're all here, Harvey.
Who have you talked to?
And yes, this is obviously recontextualized to film. This is not documentary footage of these victims speaking out, but they do feel so real. They feel so truthful. It doesn't feel like much of this was fabricated to create some kind of narrative. This feels very honest to how the events actually took place and to the voices of the victims. Samantha Morton in particular has an amazing monologue.
It's bigger than Weinstein. This is about the system protecting abusers.
It's just heartbreaking, all these monologues in this film, but they're just so powerful in the subtlety in how they're delivered, but also just that underlying sadness and anger that you can tell these characters are feeling. A lot of these actors, they're delivering these monologues very minimalistically, but under the surface, just through very subtle eye twitches or sudden glances or sudden ways they take breaths and the speech patterns they deliver their speeches with, you can really tell there's so much bent up anger inside of them that has just been festering away at them, that they're finally able to release having told these stories. And you see sometimes these stories come with catharsis through tears, through moments of relief, and those moments are equally as powerful. You know, the moments of anger and the moments of relief, the moments where the victims finally feel seen and feel heard. And that's where, as much as this film is a tragedy, as much as this film just kind of dives into the worst depths of Hollywood and the worst of what was going on in that 2016 post-election era, I do still think that this is ultimately a very hopeful piece. It shows that women, when they come together, when they make their voices heard, they are able to accomplish some great things and hopefully set forth change in the future.
I'll go on the record.
Go right. It's time to write.
These are events you can read on a Wikipedia page. These are events you can, listen to news stories. You can read the actual article that Megan Twohey and Jodie Cantor actually published that ends up being the centerpiece of this film. You can actually read that article and experience these things, but I think because we're able to see this kind of with our own eyes, as told through these actors, as written through the script by Rebecca Lenkowitz and the direction of Maria Schrader, it almost emphasizes the story even greater and puts it on full display to where I think a lot of audiences are going to see it and immediately feel angered by it, but also incredibly inspired by the women that are at the center of the story, both the victims and the journalists that are helping the victims get their stories heard. I was incredibly inspired by this film. Yes, it doesn't necessarily reinvent the wheel when it comes to its style. It doesn't necessarily have the best editing or the best cinematography or even the best writing. Some of the writing is a little matter of fact, but this is a film that doesn't need to be that. This is not standing to be this complete art piece, this piece of capital C cinema of, reinventing the way we look at film. This is not trying to be that. This film is made to get its point across, to send its message to its viewers, and to make these victims' voices heard, first and foremost. And yes, it does it in a straightforward fashion, but I think a film like this needs to do it in a straightforward fashion. I don't think there's any other way you could have done this film to kind of put a creative spin on it, because I think it would have lost a lot of the luster. I think it would have kind of minimalized and taken away from the actual powerful rawness of the stories being told. So I think She Said is surely a triumph.
I was silenced. I want my voice back.
I definitely think this is going to be a little bit harder of a sell to the Academy than something like Spotlight, because this has such a personal tie to the Academy. It has, direct ties to Hollywood, and I think some Hollywood voters, some Academy members are almost going to be a little bit disturbed by it to the point where they don't want to vote for it because they're worried of the repercussions that could have on their careers maybe, and I think this film deals with that a lot, with the idea of, if you speak out, your whole reputation is going to be tarnished. And I hope that voters, when they come to vote for the Oscars, don't feel that way, but I can definitely see how, just because of how awful of a grasp Harvey Weinstein had on Hollywood and how powerful of a grasp he had, how some Academy voters today would even treat this film that is retelling such events. It'll only be a matter of time to see if the Academy does respond well to it. I hope they do. If not, I still see Carey Mulligan being a shoo-in for a Best Supporting Actress nomination. It was announced recently that she would be in Supporting Actress and not lead, and that Zoe Kazan would be the lead. I don't think either of them are supporting. I think they are both co-leads. They both have just as much screen time. They both have the same amount of arc. We kind of see into both of their personal lives and see how this story both affects them in the workplace and outside the workplace. I don't see how you decipher one as lead and one as supporting, aside from the sake of campaigning. I mean, obviously, if you have a name like Carey Mulligan, who just got nominated for Promising Young Woman a few years ago, many people thought she should have won for that role. If you have the opportunity to put her as a supporting actress here, I absolutely think it's the right call to do so, because I think it's a much easier field to compete in Best Supporting Actress than Best Actress, because Best Actress, we have just so many contenders, from Danielle Deadwyler, Michelle Yeoh, Cate Blanchett, and now apparently Michelle Williams is going lead instead of supporting for The Fabelmans. I mean, there's really not a lot of room to navigate in that category, whereas here I think the Best Supporting Actress field is a little bit more wide open. So I think it's honestly a smart play for Universal to put Carey Mulligan in that category, because I think that makes her likelihood of getting nominated easier.
I can't change what happened to you in the past, but together we may be able to help protect other people.
But like I said, this film is not here to necessarily entertain first and foremost. It's not here to win awards first and foremost. If the awards come, great. If people are entertained by it, yeah, I mean, that's amazing. We want to be entertained by everything we see. But I think this film, as I said, stands for making the voices of its victims heard and making people who are maybe not necessarily aware of these happenings, or maybe had just read it and not been able to really kind of visualize it, to kind of put that that face to a name and really kind of give it that weight, because it is still so current, it is still relevant. I mean, this is still a conversation that is being had today in Hollywood. It's still a subject matter that is just so relevant, and I think that's what this film stands for above all else, and that's why I think you should definitely check out this film. It's definitely one of my favorites of the year because of how powerful it is, because of the things it's standing for, because of the themes of empowerment that are seen throughout this film. Like I said, this is an empowering film and an inspirational film because it leaves you feeling like you have nothing to hide. You know, you can actually make your voice heard and not feel like you're gonna be punished for it, and I hope that's what most people take away from this film. I definitely took a lot away from this film. I think the performances are excellent. Like I said, Samantha Morton has a scene-stealing moment. I think Zoe Kazan and Carey Mulligan are equally amazing in this film. It's an all-around success for me, so I highly recommend you check it out. When you check it out, if you check it out, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of it and what you think its Oscar prospects are, because, you know, we're in the midst of award season. It's always fun to talk about who's going to get nominated for things, who's going to get snubbed for things. I really hope She Said gets a few nominations. Thank you so much for watching all of my New York Film Festival videos. I know there were only 3 of them, but I hope you enjoyed them. And if you haven't checked out my reviews for White Noise and Women Talking, which I actually posted earlier today, you can check those out now. Until next time, thank you so much for watching. Have a good day and stay safe out there. See you later.